The Transcontinental Railroad has been an important piece of America's industrial movement. Its creation was based on Abraham Lincoln's idea to unite the nation after the bloody American Civil War tore apart the nation. So the placement of this expensive and risky move was paramount as to not fail. During the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln created the idea that a transcontinental railroad would connect the East Coast to the West. The East Coast had many railroads already, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad being America's first privately owned railroad in 1828. The need for a connection from the East Coast to the West Coast became more needed when people moved out to the Rocky Mountains in search of gold. So, the government sent out prospectors to scout out a route for the West with three possible routes coming from this: a northern, a southern, and a central route. The north route went through today's states of Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Washington, and into Oregon. The southern route goes from Kansas down to Texas, then moving through west through New Mexico and Arizona into California, and the central route would start in Iowa, cross the Missouri River into Nebraska, climbing the Platte Valley into Wyoming, making the trek into Utah, and coasting through Nevada and into California. These routes would be covering great distances through multiple states, each with their own climates, terrain, and engineering obstacles to overcome. The north and central routes would have to deal with the Rocky Mountains the most. Both would need to make the climb up to the mountains, and then would need to blast away the mountains, go through them by tunnel or over them with a switchback system. A switchback system is the use of multiple switches to climb up an obstacle, generally the side of a mountain or other steep geological features, first going up an incline passing a switch, throwing that switch and reversing up another incline, doing this process until reaching the top, then do the whole thing back down the other side of the mountainside. The northern route used these switchbacks, one being used on the Great Northern Stevens Pass. These switchbacks were easy and quick to build. However, it was a time-consuming task. During the winter months, it became even more time-consuming to remove snow, and because of this, the railroad would later build a tunnel making a direct path through the mountain, bypassing all of the terrain. Through this tunnel was plagued with heavy snow until an unfortunate event where an abandoned passenger train was swept away by an avalanche on the west tunnel entrance, killing 100 people. This event and others would help push the railroad to build a newer tunnel that would be longer. The new Cascade Tunnel would help move people and cargo and is still in use by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, or the BNSF. Though even today, heavy snow, frigid temperatures, and possible avalanches plague the surrounding areas. Both the northern and central routes would have to deal with the winter months and the unforgivable weather and terrain. In the north, the Great Northern emplaced snow sheds at certain points in the mountain's roots. Snow sheds, as their name suggests, are built over a stretch of the track to keep the rails from being covered in snow, though it wasn't feasible to build a snow shed the entire route, so they were used in areas where the snow was known to be deeper and in more treacherous areas. In the southern route, however, snow wasn't an issue, and mountains for the most part weren't either, with only a few exceptions. It was the southern route's lack of local resources needed to power locomotives and build the infrastructure for the southern route. Though railroads in the later part of the 19th century were built here, such as the Achita, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad and the Southern Pacific Railroad. Both needed to make innovative technology if they were to stand any chance to build and work in the area. Both need to outsource many resources, such as wood for fueling the locomotives and for building, as well as other materials. Bodies of water were scarce in the region, and tapping into the aquifer took time and resources. Both railroads got around this by building their steam locomotives with tenders that would carry more water until the next available water source being towns that had water towers. These and many other innovations needed for the railroads to function took time, which wouldn't help the growing nation coming out of war. Lincoln discussed these options with Dodge, who said that the Central route would be the best option for this monumental idea, as it was the most practical and economical for the construction. Lincoln and Dodge had a long conversation where Lincoln gathered lots of information from him. It was set on the 1st of July in 1862. Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railroad, which was for the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad to be built in the Central region. The Central route was to start in the state of Iowa and cross over the Missouri River into the now state of Nebraska. From here, the route would follow the Platte Valley and Platte River to the now state of Wyoming. Due to the unique nature of the Great Plains and Platte Valley, the route will begin its ascent to the Rocky Mountains from this point. The Great Plains are known for the most part to be flat and hilly, though the Platte River and the Platte Valley created an unnoticeable and natural ascent up and into the mountains. The land from Omaha to Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming, and from there to Ogden, Utah, would be greatly used by Union's Pacific Railroad in what would be called the Overland Route. This would be a monument in allowing for higher speeds and greater loads at the time, and even into the modern era, with trains being able to run at 45 to 50 miles an hour in many areas of the route. The Central Pacific Railroad would deal with much more mountainous and unforgivable parts of the Central Route, starting in Sacramento, California, and going through the west side of the Rocky Mountains. The task was treacherous. The work was deadly, having to blow away rock from the mountains, and in one account, an avalanche killed 100 Chinese workers in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Many others would die in the construction, but once through the mountains, rail laying went from 6 inches to 10 miles a day, eventually ending in Promontory Summit. The location was the resting ground where the race to build the Transcontinental Railroad would come to an end. The completion of the railroad was sent over telegraph with the infamous phrase, "Done." The Transcontinental Railroad was an integral piece in granting Americans easy access to both east and west coasts. With the young and growing nation spreading itself to become a greater nation, the Transcontinental Railroad needed to be economically stable. Gaining practicality and structural integrity were paramount in the planning, construction, and its operation. The debates about this monumental task have questioned whether there were better options for the construction of the railroad, though at the time, if done wrong, the placement and events that could have followed would have drastically impacted the people and their views on railroads as a whole. And, with the help of Lincoln, the diplomatic placement of the railroads was practical and accessible for both the victorious North and the shattered South. The idea would go on to help America in desperate times, transporting troops during wartime and displaying industrial might. It would carry people and goods into every year and century, standing tall as a reminder of how debate and diplomacy can have a massive effect on the outcome of history.